Club Missoula's March Forum, A Lens on the Big Sky, Filmmaking in Montana, which we are recording. My name is Brett Rosenberg, and I have the privilege to be the chair of the City Club Board of Directors, and I am delighted to see so many of you here with us today. City Club Missoula's mission is to bring people together to inform and inspire them on issues vital to the community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and free exchange of thought. We have a deep commitment to civility and civil discourse, even when we often discuss very controversial issues. Before I introduce our moderator, some thank yous. As always, thank you to the University of Montana and Alex Karklins for making these virtual forums possible. Also, thanks to the Missoula Community Access Television, which tapes our forums as part of their media assistance grants to nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves our community on cable channels 189 and 190. You can also find videos from past CCM forums by clicking the video button on our website, cityclubmissoula.com. Thanks to our sponsors, including our executive level sponsors. In addition to the University of Montana, those are Blackfoot and First Security Bank. We also like to highlight some other sponsors every month. So today we want to recognize Cost Care, Arts Missoula, and Windfall. We are grateful to our very diverse sponsors and invite you to join them by going to our website, cityclubmissoula.com. And of course, thanks to our board of directors and our administrator, Eric Legbold. City Club Missoula would also like to acknowledge that we are in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people, some of whom are present with us today at our forum. Today, we honor the path they have always shown us in caring for this place for the generations to come. Today's panel will be moderated by Missoula-based award-winning filmmaker, producer, and editor, Lynnwood Fields, who graduated with an MFA in digital filmmaking from the University of Montana. Her work has since gone on screen at over 100 film festivals and venues globally. Currently, she runs her own production company and advocates for filmmakers and productions in Montana. Lynnwood is the executive producer of the Perma-Red television series, which is on track to shoot the pilot episode this fall. In a bit of a programmatic shift, Lynnwood will also serve as one of our panelists because in what he referred to as the fun of showbiz, Jeff Wright unexpectedly got booked for a film shoot today and will be unable to join us. Lynnwood will introduce our panel. I will see you at about 12:15 or so for what we used to call table talk in the pre-COVID era, but we'll be able to provide the opportunity to ask questions. I will turn it over to Lynnwood now. See you soon.
Thank you, Brett. Appreciate it. I want to just take a moment and thank City Club for having us. What a great event, and for all the attendees, great showing. So I'm excited to jump in and introduce the two panelists today. The first being Livingston-based Charlie Skinner is the location manager for the Paramount Network television series Yellowstone, all of which is now filmed in Montana, including episodes shot in Missoula. Allison Whitmer is the film commissioner for the Montana Film Office. For the past 25 years, Allison has been involved in filmmaking, beginning with the Robert Redford classic, The Horse Whisperer, as well as the film adaptation of Winter in the Blood, penned and by acclaimed Missoula author James Welsh. Allison is a graduate of the Montana State University. And before we begin the panelists, we have a short film that we're going to show. I feel like we should all clap now. That was fantastic. Well, since that was provided from the Montana Film Office, I think I would love to start with Allison. And Allison, if you could tell us, I think it'd be important for people to know the history of the Film Office and even the history of how you got into film.
We know the history of the Film Office is really interesting because it really starts back in 1974 when our governor at the time, Tom Judge, had been really impressed by the success of Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, which was, of course, Jeff Bridges and Clint Eastwood, and they filmed in the Great Falls area. And they set up a trip to Los Angeles, and they had a huge reception and was extremely successful. And after that, the governor's office started a section that was devoted to attracting productions to Montana. And you'll remember after that, Rancho Deluxe, and a huge amount of other productions have come. And since then, we've become a place for really high quality independent filmmaking, as well as, everyone's favorite classic, A River Runs Through It, What Dreams May Come, Far and Away. And of course, now we've moved into television with Yellowstone. So that's, we're really excited. Montana's a fantastic history of filmmaking. And I got into filmmaking through economics at Montana State University. I grew up in agriculture. Filmmaking's so much like agriculture in that it's outdoors and it takes a lot of people to make it work, and it's really time sensitive. And I'm just so excited to bring the landscapes of Montana to everyone around the world, every day. It's one of my favorite things about the Film Office.
Thanks, Allison. Charlie, that's a good segue because we're talking about television. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you, from Livingston, Montana, got into film, and then also how Yellowstone came to Montana?
Well, I got into film from studying art history and photography in college. I went to the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I was always interested in still photography and filmmaking. So I kind of eventually transitioned into the business by following my dream. As far as Yellowstone goes, early on in around 2017, Taylor Sheridan approached myself and the production designer with a script that took place in the Paradise Valley, and wanted to create a spectacle television show that was much grander than anything we've seen on TV. Wanted to really make it feel like cinema. And we scoured the Paradise Valley and all over Montana to find the hero location, and eventually ended up not in Paradise Valley, but 200 miles away in the Bitterroot Valley, which was definitely not scripted, but turned out to work perfectly for us. There was a lot of pushback from the producers and the money investors to film over there because there wasn't a lot of support, they thought. And it wasn't exactly what was penned on the page. But lo and behold, we were able to get it done. And I think it's added to the scale of the show and really made the show what it is. There's a lot of work that ended up early on going to Utah, and that was strictly due to tax benefits. And I will let you talk a little bit about those, maybe transition into that.
Yeah, and before we do that, I would love for you both to expand a little bit on your jobs. So maybe Charlie, you could start, and then Allison. But Charlie, what specifically is the title of your job, and what does that mean?
Yeah, I am what's called the Supervising Location Manager. And that means that I am in charge of finding all the locations that are in the script, and B, securing them in a way that we can enable the crew to get in and out and film them appropriately. That could mean permits and contracts and insurances. And then on top of all of that, I should be the mediator between the film itself and the community. So it's my job to make sure that the community people are okay with what we're doing. And I have to walk a tightrope between making sure that everyone in the community is happy, and then also making sure the production is happy. And that is often difficult, but it's one of the things I like best about it, because I get to meet and be a part of both worlds, and that's quite interesting sometimes.
Thank you. And being part of many worlds, Allison, will you talk a little bit about your job and what you do for Film in Montana?
So the mission of the film office is really to promote Montana as a filming location to producers and location managers like Charlie. And we promote worldwide. We want our business partners with the producers and locations people and studios. We want them to know that Montana exists, that we're a viable opportunity for them, and that we have, the resources and the visuals that they can use. So it's really about creating an avenue for them to approach us and say, we're looking for this type of location, and can you assist us? Now, the other thing that we do too, the intent is that we promote Montana as a filming location. And we also know that people enjoy watching films and then visiting the places where they've seen the film. The river runs through it is, of course, our long-term example, where fly fishing in Montana increased by 60% the year after A River Runs Through It came out. So it was an immediate, long-time favorite of our tourism industry is A River Runs Through It. And Yellowstone is having, that effect too. We're getting lots of people asking about participating in the Western lifestyle, either through just hiking, going to dude ranches, riding horses, visiting our national parks, learning about farming and ranching, which is really interesting for tourism in general. So we're really excited about that. The other thing we do is we serve as a central clearing point for inquiries and questions. So if you want to do a film, let's say for Yellowstone, we worked with the producers and they said, this is our list of things we're looking for. We're looking for the spectacular ranch, we're looking for this type of landscapes. And then we were able to go with our contacts in our own database, with our tourism regions, with our Chamber of Commerce's, the Montana Farm Bureau, the Department of Agriculture, and generate a list and up to real estate agents everywhere in Montana, and then present a list to Charlie and his production team and say, do any of this fit the criteria you're looking for? So Charlie didn't have to know a person at the Farm Bureau because I already did. So I was able to call up that person and she says, great, here's my 10 ranches that are the right size and have people who are interested. And so we help with permits, jurisdictions, locations. We have a talent database, we have a crew database, and we have contacts within all the state agencies also. Fish, Wildlife and Parks, Bureau of Rec, all these kind of obscure kind of things, down to people with exotic animals. There's zebras and camels in Montana, and those require special permits. And we know the people that can help, find those things. So for example, here's one. People who spend a lot of time in agriculture will know this, that in Montana, we have certain zones where horses have to be fed weed-free hay in order for them to be in there. And Charlie knows this because he has to work with his wranglers to make sure that they're feeding the animals the appropriate diet before they enter into certain, protected and permitted places in Montana. And so that's a cooperation between all of his departments and our departments and their permits. And something very simple, like you fed your horse the wrong kind of hay, can really create havoc if you're not prepared. So that's the thing we help with. And then we promote Montana at film festivals and with our tourism regions and our hotels. And we're very excited to bring them concluded projects that you're going to see on screen.
Thank you. Charlie, I was going to ask you before we kind of get into where film is with taxes, but when a production like yours comes in, it's like a small community. And can you talk about how many people work on these productions and then kind of the ripple effect in the community? I know we have a mixture of filmmakers and business people on here, so how they can connect and all that kind of info.
Yeah, sure. I think what's interesting about film is that it varies. You could have a smaller project come in, an independent film, and they'll have about 50 people, or you can have an enormous TV show like Paramount's Yellowstone, and we can bring upwards of 300 and more. But inevitably, all of those people need to eat. They need to be housed, predominantly if they're coming from out of state. They will need to buy fuel from your gas stations. They need to eventually find costumes for the characters or props for the characters. And that means that your retail stores will get an influx of money. They will need to rent heavy equipment. My department itself will need to rent heavy equipment to work on roads. We will need to hire people that aren't necessarily full-time members of the crew, but are members of the crew's periphery, such as police officers or fire department, or like I said, road workers, construction workers, and then just, grocery stores, bars, pretty much every sort of retail will inevitably be visited, most likely by somebody from the crew. And the crews can get big, and that helps. And I think what's interesting to know, and I think is important for people to remember, is that our industry doesn't leave a lot of tailings behind. We come in and it might look like we cause a big impact, and we do while we are on site, but more or less once we leave, and that could be within 3 months on a small movie or a few years for a bigger show, generally speaking, the landscape is not going to be altered much, and we're not going to leave a lot of waste behind. And all Montana received was a good influx of money into the economy, and also promoted it potentially for more. So I think that's an important thing to recognize. If you're ever frustrated with us, if we're ever in downtown and we've locked down your road and it's a little bit more traffic than you expect, and it just not very enthused by all of it at that time, just remember that we will go away quite soon, and all of it will be returned generally to normal, and hopefully the economy got a little bit of boost while we're there.
And just to add to that, Charlie, how's your experience filming in Montana and the people in Montana?
It's been great. More or less everybody's very receptive and enthusiastic about it. I think that Montanans in general appreciate the beauty of the state in which they live. And I think that as much as sometimes they don't want to share it too much, they do like people to see and experience how wonderful it is. And people do get that experience from watching our movies. And so generally speaking, everyone has been very helpful and accommodating and friendly.
Great. Allison, you were talking about some films, 90s and 2000s that were highly successful. What kind of happened in between there, and what's happening now that's doing a big uptick for film and television in Montana?
Well, of course, we had some major feature films in the 90s, and anywhere from Far and Away to What Dreams May Come. And then we've had the influx of different financial incentives for filmmakers in different parts of the country and in other countries. So we found that Canada instituted some financial incentives in the mid-90s that drew some of the larger productions set in Montana off to Canada. Legends of the Fall is a big example there, a film written by Jim Harrison and went to Canada because of financial incentives. And then that became a sea change in the industry, how they looked at financing and films. And now you'll notice that a lot of countries and many states in the United States have certain financial incentives, and we normally call them tax incentives. One of our biggest financial incentives doesn't have legislation behind it, but it's the fact that Montana does not have a sales tax, immediate off the top savings. We've recently instituted the Media Act, which is an income tax credit program for that filmmakers can participate in. And that has definitely influenced some people's decision-making, including Yellowstone's, to come and film in Montana. And then with that, we have also seen that more landscape and open areas of the country becoming more popular. You might have read the article in the Wall Street Journal about the resurgence of the Western, which, you know, I'll give some pretty big props to Taylor Sheridan for really being a person interested in the Western genre. And so Westerns, of course, are a good spot for Montana. So we have a current Media Act tax credit program that's very competitive with other states. And then we also don't have a sales tax. So different areas of the country have these. And so, of course, those are things that producers take into consideration wherever they want to film, in addition to landscape and story.
Great. I'm just going to add to that because I know a little bit about the Media Act, but a line producer on a film does a lot of their budgets, and a tax credit is one of the lines on their budget. And it's usually one of the first questions they ask when they want to go to a state or Canada. And for a long time, Montana did not have one, or did not have a very competitive one. And in 2019, a bunch of us worked on getting what's called the Media Act together. We now have one of the most competitive in the United States. And the great thing about it is it's based off productions getting back direct spend for spending in Montana. And the way the productions get it, and this is really good for everyone on the call, if you pay a Montana state income tax, you are eligible to buy this, and at a discount. And so as one CPA said, it's like you're selling me $10 for $8.50. And that's kind of the way it works. So if anybody has questions about that, I'm happy to be connected about how that works too. But I know that makes a difference because, and I'm sure Charlie could talk a little bit about that. Can you talk about the transition from Utah to Montana and how the tax credit helped in any way?
Sure. Essentially what happened is that the tax credit in the state of Utah was much greater than what we had in Montana at the beginning of the show. And so we decided to do the majority of our filming in the state of Utah and staging our film sets in our officing out of Utah so that we can use their tax credit. Now that was not what the creatives on the show wanted to do. The creatives on the show wanted to keep everything filmed in Montana because we wanted to keep that authenticity and make it feel more spectacular than anything else we've seen on TV. It's easy to sort of fake things all the time in Hollywood. We can shoot in New Mexico, we can shoot even in California for Montana, but eventually people do catch on and you see the same locations over and over, and it gets repetitive, and it's not as spectacular as it can be. And Taylor was pretty adamant about making sure this was spectacular, and the original production designer was adamant about it as well. And in my opinion, I was too. So we wanted to shoot everything in Montana. We just couldn't make it work financially. So we did move to Utah. We shot in the first season, probably about half and half, Utah and Montana. And then season 2, we did much more in Utah. And then even in season 3, we did even more in Utah. And it was kind of going the wrong direction, in my opinion. And then lo and behold, Utah sort of ran out of their tax incentive. They're all capped at a certain point, and Yellowstone by itself was eating too much of the incentive, and so they couldn't really afford us anymore. And by that time, you all had passed the Media Act, and the producers were brave enough to move the whole show from Utah up to Montana and take part in your tax incentive instead. Now that was a big move because that meant we had to move our offices. That meant we had to move our full stage. That meant we had to find new housing for everybody. That meant all the locations that we had found in Utah would have to be refound in Montana. So it was big, but I think that for the scale of the show, and I'm excited to see this in season 4, you'll notice a difference, and it's gonna look even better than it has in the past season. So we're really excited about it. We've got everything in place now, and we're ready to go.
Yeah, that's so exciting. And for those of you who are participating, when those of us in Montana see shows and they're filmed in Canada and New Mexico, that was the reason why. And now we do have a great tax credit, and we're seeing a ton of films. And it doesn't just have to be Montana. It can be anything now can film here. So Allison, maybe you can talk about the success this year of what really happened by having this passed, and kind of, I know you can't talk about the future, so I'll talk a little bit about that.
Well, we've definitely had, we were basically on this day last year in March, we were in Los Angeles presenting our incentive program to directors, producers, agents, location managers in Los Angeles. We were in Burbank. And we had an evening reception with the current governor at that point, Steve Bullock. And we were able to reach out to a couple hundred people, anywhere from, the executives from Disney were there and other executives from other studios. So we were very happy to be able to talk with them in person and talk about Montana. And a great deal, we could go on all day about the people who attended, but we were able to talk to all of those people and give out information. And so that created a cascade of telephone calls and emails and inquiries about people wanting to think about moving their show to Montana, or shows they had upcoming, where Montana was certainly became a new aspect of the conversation. So they'd say, hey, I have this location, this location, this location in these 3 states. Now I can add Montana to the list to contemplate. And we were able to participate in some of those very early conversations. You notice there's been a television series called Big Sky, which shot mostly in British Columbia. And they were one show that was able to reroute some of their creative, and they came to Montana and filmed a great deal of aerial photography to augment the work that they were doing. So that was one show that we were able to assist them with bringing that aerial unit. And then we've had a great deal of smaller features and some commercials that put Montana on their list, and some of them have come and filmed. And so we're very excited that we've put the crew to work and that we've been able to also assist these larger shows like Yellowstone. And so now we're getting a lot of attention. And for those of you who are working in the arts, in tourism, in the hotel, catering industry, we do a lot of work with Glacier Country and Missoula Economic Development. You've seen the uptick in inquiries that have come from us from shows that are asking about Montana.
Can you give us any numbers of shows that filmed this year? Do you have?
I don't have an exact number for you, but we did have about 6 features and 2 full television series and a couple additional reality series, one of which filmed in Lolo. If you guys are watching MTV, the new part of the new season of Floribama on MTV was filmed in Montana and Arizona, and the Montana filming took place in Lolo and the Missoula area. And even though that show couldn't participate in the tax incentive because it doesn't qualify in the category, they found out about Montana through our promotion of the tax credit, and we're very excited to come here. So we had some fun pieces.
I want to talk a little bit about the future before we open it up to questions. And so, Charlie, can you talk to me about the future of Yellowstone and maybe some spin-off series that I've been reading about and what that means for Montana?
Yeah, I wish I knew the total future of Yellowstone. I do know that we are slated to film a season 5, and we will be there this summer doing that into the fall. There is a spinoff that some people might have seen advertised on the Super Bowl that is a prequel to Yellowstone about the older Dutton generation. And that will take place still to be determined, but I can't imagine that none of it will be filmed in Montana. So I would imagine some of that coming as well. And hopefully, now that we have our sort of roots down in Montana for Yellowstone and we're hitting a roll, that will go on for a while longer. But honestly, unfortunately, can't tell that. Not because I don't want to, but because I don't really know.
You can't read the future? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll try to make it smooth for you, Charlie. Keep staying here. Allison, can you talk about what you're seeing for the future, even this upcoming year, people calling in, that kind of thing?
We definitely have seen an increase in inquiries for mid-level features. For those of you that follow the industry, we have been a really amazing home for high quality independent cinema. And those are usually films with budgets $2.5 million and below. And so there's to be films like Winter in the Blood and Certain Women and Mickey and the Bear. And these films have done really well. They've been to Cannes, they've been to Sundance, they've been to US festivals. We have a small film like this that's in Berlin right now. And so we've been doing really good in that. And the mid-level range films are the films that we really lost when tax incentives came in, the $5 to $25 million pictures. The River Runs Through It, the Hidalgos, we really lost those type of films. And so we've been kind of stuck in the high quality independence or a really great scene from The Revenant, but not The Revenant itself. So the inquiries we're getting now are beginning to be from those mid-level producers, those $3 to $7 million pictures, and then the $10 to $20 million pictures. So we're really excited to bring a different level of filmmaking back into Montana, because then they can go and do more stunt work, they can go into more rural areas, they have a little bit better budgets to do things, they can build more sets and utilize more of what we have to offer here. So that's been really exciting to talk to those production teams.
This is all very exciting news. I did want to update everybody kind of what's going on in legislation. I'm part of a group called the Montana Film Coalition, and we did get the Media Act passed, which is a great incentive, up to 35% productions could get back. However, there is what's known as a cap. So there's $10 million that we can use right now, according to the current Media Act that was passed in 2019. A lot of us are working, and we invite any of you who would like to see film become the great economic resource that it could be to reach out to your legislation. We are trying to raise that cap because I'm going to throw you under the bus a little bit, Charlie, but Yellowstone itself could take that whole cap, if not more. And there are lots of local Montana productions that are eligible for that. And this is a good problem to have, by the way. It's good that we have so much interest that we want to raise the cap, but that's where we're at. And then Russ Fletcher, you asked a question about studios in Montana. Really, until that cap is raised, we can't get the investments to build studios because they need to know that productions can come in and it's not just a one show pony. We need to be able to have multiple productions. So, you know, I think we'd be sitting pretty well nationally if we could get to at least 100 million for the cap raise. We have goals of even higher at some point, but that way many productions could come in and we could really see the economic ripple effect of that in the state. Could you both talk to a little bit about how businesses and filmmakers, I kind of touched on this, but really what they should do if they want to get involved in this? And maybe Allison, you can start, and then Charlie, you know, your stance on productions.
Well, you know, we encourage all businesses to work closely with their chambers of commerce, and then of course with their tourism related business, to be working with their local convention and visitor bureau and their regions. We also encourage everyone to work with their economic development agencies. We spend a lot of time talking to those groups when we're looking for things. But we also have a feature on our website, which is montanafilm.com, where you can list your location. And so we are always looking for new locations and contacts, and as well as support services. As Charlie knows, it is the most mundane things that are sometimes the hardest to find. We have a list. We had a researcher go and attempt to find every porta potty supplier in the state a couple of years ago. And it took us about a month. And we specifically had one of our researchers call every single porta potty supplier that we could find. And we also have a list of caterers and water trucks and people who have different types of cattle. There's certain breeds of cattle that we want to make sure that if someone asks about them, we know. We also track hotels and 4x4s and car rentals and vacation rentals. We have all these services that we want people to know about. So when someone like Charlie calls and says, hey, I want to get a hold of the local fire department and I'm looking for an antique fire engine, or I'm looking for a certain type of water truck, we have 10 or 12 resources to send to him to at least get him going. So we encourage everyone that would like to work with us more, either as a location or a support service, reach out and become involved. And the arts, Missoula has an arts council and several arts organizations. We also work closely with those.
Wonderful. Charlie?
Sure. I'll talk a little bit about the personnel issue or personnel reasons or personnel getting on. Excuse me. I think that people need to realize that film crews we're just normal people, and we're not intimidating by any means. So be proactive. If you see a film company shooting in your area and you have a resume and you want to join on as a PA, or you have a location that you want somebody to look at, or you have something that you think somebody might want, it's okay to go up to the periphery of the shoot and talk to a security guard or talk to somebody that's standing by and say, hey, can you hand this to, I don't know who to give this to, but maybe can you take this resume, or can you take my business card? And it might get to the right person, and you might get called back. It's best, just like in any job, to be proactive and try to get yourself out there. And you can approach us. It's fine. Just sort of, if things are a little bit chaotic, just stay in the periphery and try to find somebody that's on the outside of what's really going on and talk to them. And hopefully we all have radios, and somebody might even be able to come over and talk to you personally. So that would be my advice. And also, of course, always get in touch with the Film Commission. Allison's website and her team are really good. So if you ever have any questions, that would be my first call, and they can direct you almost directly right to myself or anybody else on any other production.
Thank you. I think also, as a filmmaker in the state of Montana, something to keep in mind, because I'm seeing some questions, and I know Montanans have been wondering how to get more Montanans hired. And I think what's really important is we are looking at some legislation to maybe get some training going. These film sets have to run a really tight ship, which means they need people who know what they're doing and can go really quickly. And we have all sorts of people who are interested in, I think, training and getting on some sets and becoming a PA, a production assistant, which is somebody who can help unload the trucks and move stuff around. You get to see what it's like on a set, is a great first step. Also, going to school for that really helps for film. We have some great film programs in the state, but training is going to be key for us to get more local hires. I am very passionate about Montanans getting hired and about productions having a good experience with Montana hires. So those two things are being worked out. We're kind of just seeing a big influx, and something like Yellowstone had a pretty big crew that they'd already worked with. Now, there's a lot of productions, like Allison was talking about, in the $2 million range to $5 million, which are great for local hires. And the other thing is, it's kind of a word of mouth business. Somebody works on a set with you and you are great to work with, and they're going to refer you, and that's how it all starts. And so I would just encourage people to be tenacious, educated, and available. Allison, do you want to talk a little bit more about that too?
We've got incredible crew that work here in the state. Charlie and I first started working together when I was line producer on Certain Women in Livingston. And then, he came back to Montana and eventually is, splits his time now between Los Angeles and Montana. And we have crew that work on, the biggest films that you can find, and they work all around the world. And they're in pretty high demand. And we have crew that they're training. And then we have crew that we're pulling out of, they're moving back to Montana from other states, and crew that are developing their skills. We just talked to a crew member today who's diversifying from one department to another so they can work in two departments. And we're always willing to assist people. As you know, films and television series are pretty specific, and they're looking for certain skills. And sometimes our Montana specific skills are exactly what they're looking for. And sometimes, they're looking for other certain things, like maybe they don't need someone who knows so much about a Montana centric aspect, but they need someone who's worked with a large budgeting program that the industry uses that we don't use so much here. So like you said, we're very interested in trying to assist with training and with what the Department of Labor offers and our film schools. And we've also been able to assist shows in finding niche crew members that they might not have known about. So it's an ongoing process, and we're definitely looking forward to having a multitude of production that needs all the skill levels and talents that our crew and has to offer here.
Thanks, Allison. And I'll also add that the Media Act, the film incentive, does incentivize hiring locally. It's 25% for Montanans and 15% for out of state. That's the way we've been kind of going around it right now. And, you know, to penalize a production for not hiring local might not work right now because we're a small population. That does not mean that won't change. And that is a huge goal. You know, I really believe film is a perfect fit for some of these blue collar jobs that are going out, like mining, vets. When they come back, vets are great on set because they're already used to working in teams and they're working on a mission. So that is, when I talk about the training money, that's the kind of money where jobs that are kind of shifting out of the resource industry, specifically in Montana, we embrace them, we welcome them in film, we think they're a perfect fit. So that is a goal that we're working on. And, you know, I think everybody wants to see this have a ripple effect that economically benefits all of Montanans. And we've seen some really cool stories. I don't know if Charlie could share anything, but there's, you know, people who've made a side job, like for instance, CPAs. We need so many CPAs now. And so, you know, if you know CPAs, send them my way for verification reports. There's a real incentive that film brings for jobs. Charlie, do you want to talk about any stories you have about, I know some glass stories of breaking glass, but that you know about.
Breaking glass, you're going to have to get me up on that one.
There's a woman in town that you had to buy the glass because you guys were breaking it. And, you know, just fun stories that.
Yeah, that was definitely, we had a scene where we, in a diner where we had some stuntmen that had to be thrown through some glass, and all the windows in the diner were mirrored or tinted because you needed that to keep the heat in and the cold out. However, we couldn't see through them, so we had to remove every piece of glass in the diner and replace it with new glass that we could see through and some stunt glass that we could break. And then after it, pull all ours out and then put theirs back in. And so, you know, the glass company itself became a very big part of my team, actually, and did a lot of work for us there in Missoula and throughout the Bitterroot Valley, helping us with different, you know, places where we needed to change some glass. Leslie is on this call. Her community, her cost care office was integral in enabling us to film Yellowstone last season. There was a point when nobody in production was sure whether or not we could even shoot during COVID. And I think that we were probably the first or very early on, as far as a big production, to get going during COVID and get their crew members tested and get the unions to write off and say, yes, it's okay. They've got the right infrastructure and they've got the right protocols in place to allow their crews to work. And that was all because of Cost Care Missoula. And their team basically got on board and got everybody tested and kept us safe. That's just two easy examples right off the bat, both in Missoula. But looks like somebody else, Brett's coming on, so I'll stop.
Thanks, Charlie.
It's good, great stuff, Charlie, Allison, and Lynnwood. We're going to open it up for audience questions and answers momentarily. If you have a question, please use the little Q&A portal at the bottom right part of your screen. I think most of us are pretty well versed in how Zoom works by now, but just in case, here you go. As I mentioned earlier, we're committed to civil discourse, so please keep your questions civil and try to avoid making statements, and we'll have a couple board members forward your questions to Lynnwood or whichever panelist is appropriate, and hopefully get some additional discussion going. Thank you all so much.
I do see a question about the Missoula Hub. I'm with those guys on the Film Coalition, and that goes back to the cap being raised. Until that cap gets raised, studios are going to have a hard time getting investors in. So what I know right now is that's still something they're very passionate about and want it to come, but working on legislation first, and then there'll be next steps. Charlie, I did have a question on here. Have the dates for Yellowstone season 5 been set to start production?
Not entirely, but we're looking like we're going to start gearing up in mid-May for a mid-July film start. So we would start around May 17th and prep for about 6 to 8 weeks, and then get rolling and probably film from mid-July to early mid-November. We'd like to finish up right before Thanksgiving.
Great. And then I don't know if you can tell us this, but how much did Yellowstone bring into Montana's local economy, like Missoula, or just the state?
I wish I knew. I can't personally speak on that. You'd have to talk to the UPM probably. They'd have better numbers. So I don't want to quote any numbers that I don't necessarily know perfectly.
Allison, do you have any numbers for this year?
For this year, none that they haven't released any numbers. We do know from some newspaper articles that were published in Utah, on the Salt Lake Tribune, that it was estimated that between $20 and $30 million a season in that Park City, Salt Lake City area. So it'll be interesting to see when they're able to release numbers. Anecdotally, we know that I think Charlie, you spent $7,000 to $10,000 paying for parking meters, and rented the Missoula courthouse, and I think someone told me that was about a $15,000 location fee. So we know that there's definitely Charlie's location budget has definitely been spent locally. So we'll all be interested to see those numbers when the production chooses to release them.
And I'll tell you that the Film Coalition ran some outside numbers to present to legislators. We've had economic spend around, I'm gonna also give it a little broad, but 60 to 90 million this year actually for spend, and that's during COVID. I will also say there's been certain towns that have been saved by film economically during COVID, Butte being one of them. Butte is very, very receptive and open to film, and they had multiple features and television shows during COVID, and some of those hotels went from 0 occupancy days to 1,500. So, and we haven't really jumped into COVID except for the fact that I'll say, and maybe you guys can talk about this, but productions had very strict protocols around how to do that and how safe they were. And in some places they were probably wearing more masks and getting tested way more than anybody in the area. But I don't know if you guys want to talk about COVID and the success around that.
Well, both Charlie and I, we don't know how to thank Leslie for stepping up to the plate with I'm sure the first phone call she got was frantic and just trying to figure out COVID. I think Leslie's worked with 10 or 15 production crews now all over the state, and has been a resource on COVID, a resource on testing, a resource on nurses, resource on scheduling. So much of the production would not have been able to happen at the way that we did it during COVID here in Montana without Leslie's help. COVID has now turned into a 20% cost in the budget. It has been really expensive. Crews are testing every 48 hours. It's an intense process. It's an expensive process. And Leslie has turned into just an incredible resource for COVID. And there's a lot of other medical tests that we do to make sure that cast and crew are safe on set. And, she's been such a great partner. It's been really, really fantastic to have her support and her business with us in Montana.
Yeah, I want to say something on that too. We as film crews are under the microscope by the community. Everybody's looking at us to see whether or not we've screwed something up. And we were really, really, we wanted to be really, really conscious of COVID. We didn't want to be the new people in town that brought this disease with us to the community. And the numbers in Montana were really low when we started, and we wanted to make sure they were. So we were actually went overboard to make sure that everybody was tested as much as 3 to 5 times a week. And we did our best to follow all these protocols to make sure that there was no community spread from our crew members. And that was something that the producers and myself and Leslie and everybody got on board really quickly, and wanted to make sure that the community knew. And we took it really seriously. And I imagine that we'll take it seriously again this season. I know that we're hoping that everybody gets vaccinated and this disease goes away, but I would suspect that you'll still see us and we'll be the ones wearing masks and double masks, even though everybody's vaccinated. So, we took it really seriously.
We actually have lots of questions coming in, so we may not get to them all, but I want to start asking or answering some of these too. What Montana cities would you like to see building out of the right facilities for production? Maybe you guys have an idea of that, but I will tell you the ones I know that are trying to do it. Missoula, Hamilton, Bozeman, and Billings all have places, and Livingston has what's called Yellowstone Ranch Club, or Film Ranch. I'm saying that wrong. Anyway, which is a whole Western set that they built. It's very cool. And then some of them are purpose-built facilities, which are just a blank slate that people can fill in. Some are revamping old buildings. So there is a lot of people interested in that, and that does help for our infrastructure for more productions to come in. Do you want to talk about studios at all, Charlie? Just because that is important. We have the beautiful views, but what do studios do for production?
Well, I think first off, to go back to that question, is the productions are going to want to come into a city that does have more infrastructure than another. We need to have an airport nearby. We're going to need to have hospitals. We're going to need to have hotel rooms and these very restaurants. So I would just say that generally speaking, the bigger cities here in Montana are going to get the most sort of impact straight away from the film community. As far as studios go, right now we're making do with a gigantic warehouse with very high ceilings, and then we'll build the studio out. A big show has the ability to use a raw space and make it and convert it into a studio. We can use hangars, we can use refrigerated storage facilities, any raw space with a nice concrete floor and really high ceilings can potentially be utilized as a studio until proper sound stages are built. I think that's all.
Yeah, somebody is asking about the tax credit, 10 million, 100% taxpayer money. What are the legislative obstacles to passing an increase? One thing I want to be really clear about, we wrote this tax credit so that it would never come out of the budget. The state never writes a check. What that comes from is the Montana state income tax payers, and they write the productions a check, and then they get a discount on their state income tax. We have about 1 point something billion Montana state income tax payers. So at 10 million, we're not even chipping at it. Okay, and then they were asking how many cast crew members of Yellowstone and other films fall in love with Montana and decide to move here or buy property here. And Dee Dee lives in the Flathead area.
Well, we've had, one of my very good friends in Livingston came here for River Runs Through It, and they moved here from Los Angeles. This is back in '96. They still live here. They run an arts organization. They, own property. And we've had that happen in Butte with Lonesome Dove. The Lonesome Dove came and then vendors did Don't Come Knocking. And I have heard anecdotally that several people have bought property in and around the Missoula area because they enjoyed working here so much. And, Charlie and I worked in Livingston on certain women, and that was a great experience. And Charlie has a home there now, which is great because he's so much closer for all of us to work with.
We actually have a question about the filmmaker, Kelly, from Certain Women. What was your, Charlie, what was your experience working with her? And do filmmakers like her have a significant future in the Montana film industry?
I could probably talk for too long about working with Kelly. I love Kelly. She's an amazing filmmaker. And that was a wonderful project. I scouted all over the West for her for that project. We were in Eastern Oregon, we were in Idaho, we were in Nevada, but we just kept coming back to Montana. We went all the way from Billings to the western side to probably Missoula area and ended up in Livingston. For sure, Kelly loves Montana, and I can definitely see her coming back and making more films here. She spends a lot of time in Portland, and Portland's quite close. So I definitely see a future for her somewhere around here. Yeah.
Okay, I love this question. Are there any movies that inspired you all to work in film?
Oh, there's so many. I was really taken with a short film done probably in the 50s, which was a black and white short film of an Ambrose Bierce Civil War kind of ghost story. It's called An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. Made a really lovely short film out of that. And I was really fascinated with the intersection of time and film that they could do in the film. And then I really enjoyed the idea that you could capture a landscape and capture a feeling and then take it to other people who had no idea, and you could have a conversation about it. And you could bring that to someone who has, someone who lives in a place where there isn't what we have or what they didn't have. And that has just become more of how I like to work with people as it goes on. We've been collaborating with the State Department in Washington, D.C. on a series of films. They put together a film series from around the world to talk about cultural differences. And I just was on one of their seminars the other day, and that type of thing inspires me every day. So that's kind of my story.
Charlie?
In particular, I'm not sure I can name one film, but I think that early on when I was younger, the scale of certain films like The Godfathers and Apocalypse Nows and Heaven's Gate, I was in awe at how you could do that and what it took to make that and how you could be transported into these different worlds. And I couldn't even fathom what it took. And I think that's what got me interested into looking into what it took. And from there dove into different genres of filmmaking and such. But man, the sheer scale of those films was insane to me.
I'll just add, I think for me, Dead Poets Society, when I saw that movie, it was the first time I realized that you can just impact the way people feel with visual editing. That just blew my mind. And even when we were showing that short that Allison gave us at the film office, I love the way I feel when I watch film. And I think even though, we're talking about the business side and the production side, I will never let go of the storytelling side, which is just so what draws me and what keeps me going in it. And also why I really think Montana is a perfect fit. We love telling stories. We love connecting. We just are those kind of people. And so I think film as an economic resource is just a really nice fit. And as Charlie's kind of alluded to, it's pretty green as an industry. And I think that's really exciting. Keeping the landscape is important. And I just think there's real power in that. Okay, we have so many questions coming in. Okay, you did allude, Charlie, to people reaching out to you. I don't know, do you guys have a production space or production office that is located in Hamilton or Darby, or where people could connect?
We have an office in Stevensville. Last season was a little bit awkward because we weren't allowed any visitors because of COVID. But we do have an office in Stevensville, and we'll have that on Main Street again. It's unmarked, sort of rather nonchalant building, but I imagine this year we could probably have more visitors, and you could always go to that office and probably hand off a resume to at least the receptionist at front. So yeah, we have an office in Stevensville.
Do you use volunteers ever?
Interns, a little bit, yeah. It's my department's a little bit hard because all my workers have to be insured by the payroll company, and most of the crew members typically do. So having interns and volunteers gets a little bit iffy sometimes, but I imagine that there's a room for that in the production office.
Thank you. I think the three of us talked about this, and I think it's an important thing to bring up because many Montanans ask about this, but with the increased exposure to the world of our great state, more and more people want to come to Montana. Those of us who've called Montana home for decades now experience large numbers of people on trails and on rivers. The crowds have an adverse effect on enjoying the outdoors. Can you speak to this impact on Montana? Is there a way to mitigate this?
Well, we do have the two most, what I think are the two most beautiful national parks in the system, Glacier and Yellowstone. And, there are lots of conversations about crowds. We at my office like to encourage people through film to go visit some of the more less visited places in Montana. One of my favorites is Fort Peck Dam. It's the largest hydraulically filled earth dam in the world with thousands of miles of shoreline. We've been working with several of the dinosaur, fossil, and paleontologist shows to show people the beauty of other parts of Montana that have their own special quality. And that's really our focus, and not just, putting a lens on the more popular places in Montana, but to show options and give options for people to go out into other parts of the state and go visit those places and meet new people out there. There's some really lovely parts of Montana that I think are underutilized by some of our visitors. And we really like to get them out there, and showing them on film is one way to encourage them to go visit.
Thanks, Allison. Charlie, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's a true statement. I think by showcasing the state, inevitably that will maybe encourage more tourism and more visitors. But that's kind of the reality of the world right now, is that everything has become a little bit more available. And if it wasn't for TV shows, you've got, social media and more tourists anyways, more fly fishermen, more hunters, more other people that are coming to the state anyways, that will eventually share their findings on social media and such. So sadly, I think that that's just something that every sort of last unknown place is going to experience. But like Allison said, in the film community, we don't necessarily showcase the more well-known places. I'd actually prefer to find places that were lesser known, and turn the lenses on those places. And so, hopefully that will help sort of move the impact around a little bit. But that's a tough one. That's a reality of the world right now, and there isn't any easy answer to that.
Yeah, I would just say that I think that Montana should become the platform for other places. I think we should ripple out to other places. There's no need to not have this be the only last best place. And there's beautiful places across the world, but that's a deep question that has lots of different variables in it. I do have to say one thing, that even though I work for the Film Coalition and promoting film, I also am very passionate about affordable housing. And so that's one way to kind of combat those things, is I think Montanans need to be able to still live here and stay here. That's a very important thing. And when we pass the Media Act, it really truly is to give good paying jobs to Montanans first and foremost. So in terms of crowds, sometimes you just hope for a really big winter and scare people off a little. But somebody actually asked that question. So the winters here can be a bit tough for folks coming from Southern California, et cetera. Does the cast crew have a hard time? I'm assuming productions don't necessarily stop due to the winter weather, or do productions slow down all around the state in the winter?
Oh, it's kind of a mix. We have producers who eagerly look forward to the snow. Anyone that does a ski film or a snowboard film, they are tracking the first snowfall from the beginning to the end. There's that group of filmmakers who live for winter sports, and that's their niche market. Other filmmakers have snow scenes in their scripts, and that's when all of the research by Antarctic expeditions and North Pole expeditions and working in cold, all those things you hear from the large sporting good companies, that's where really good gear and really good preparation comes in. Just as if you were going hunting or if you were going ice fishing or skiing, preparation is key. And so, yes, there has been some shocks from people coming from other states where they got on the plane, it was 80 degrees, and they got here, it was 20 below. With the proper gear, we've been able to keep many, many productions going in the snow and in the cold. And then, of course, if you're going for the real special effects of a blizzard, the in-person blizzard is always best. And we've been able to capture some really amazing footage with that. Yeah.
Charlie, you want to talk about your crew? And
yeah, we actually try to wrap it up before we get too much snow. It's just the majority of our show takes place outside. Majority of our filming is exteriors. And it's really hard on the crew and the animals and everybody to film day in and day out when it gets too cold and too snowy. So for safety's sake, our show tries to wrap it up before it really gets bad. But that's not to say that we don't do it in the snow all the time. We had, as you guys all know, we had early snow this year. October, we were getting a lot of snow down in the valley, and then it basically stopped in November until February. So, but we finished at Thanksgiving and went home. So we try to stop. It's just too hard for not just because a lot of our crew's not from here. It's too hard for even people from here, and it's too hard on the animals and such too.
I have a question here from Tori. I'm a time-lapse filmmaker and photographer. Do you have any advice for someone like me who wants to have my clips used in a film or having them used for promotional material by someone like the film office, etc.?
Oh, yes. And there's a couple questions about crew that we've seen go by. They're more than welcome to send us a portfolio link and their information to our main email, which is montanafilm@mt.gov. The tourism part of MOTBD does do photo calls, and I don't know the exact process for that, but I know a couple times a year they do photo calls, and they do have an ad agency that talks to people all the time about different pieces. So it's always fun for them to send us an email at montanafilm@mt.gov, and we will forward that on to the appropriate person. And then I'll also take this time, a couple of questions people had about crew hiring and labor and Canada and things like that. A lot of that's handled by the appropriate trade union. So if they have more detailed questions, they can send that to us and we'll be happy to forward them to the rep of the trade unions. A lot of the questions about certain types of crews and compilations, that's all agreements negotiated with the specific craft union in that department.
Charlie, have you ever worked with the American Prairie Reserve?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's beautiful, but remote, yes.
Where is it?
It's kind of up in the northern Missouri breaks between Malta and Lewistown. And then they have a couple different properties. They have a big chunk up there by the National Monument.
So this is a great question. How can we help promote filming opportunities in Montana?
Well, we obviously want to let people know that they have beautiful locations so they can sign up as a location. They can also let us know if they see opportunities in print or they've run into, sometimes people sit next to each other on the airplanes and talk about it. But they can also come to us with ideas, and they can, if they see a film crew or if they're working with someone like with Charlie's group, they can talk about the economic benefits that it brings. And we can also talk about the type of things that we're trying to capture. The photograph behind me is of the Rocky Mountain front, and we have a lot of commercial filmmakers that film along that area between Great Falls and the Canadian border, because conservation groups have done an immense amount of work working with local landowners and municipalities to preserve that viewshed. And that is one way that you can promote Montana to other people, that we have these incredible landscapes.
I was going to add to that, and Charlie, you can add to this, but when productions come to certain places in the state, having a welcoming atmosphere for productions. And again, I'm going to just quote Butte and Hamilton and Darby have done a great job with this, but Butte even has locals from different businesses that meet monthly to discuss how they can become more film friendly. And what that looks like is having a list of all their hotels that have places where people can actually cook in, how many stays they have, what kind of locations they have. So they have a whole team that's called Butte Film Friendly. And what that creates is a welcoming atmosphere for productions when they come in to answer questions quickly, like places that they could have production offices. They have the great Finley Hotel. So I personally think that's some place that Montana in general, each location could start putting together. The film office does a great job, but having touchstone people in those areas to answer those questions really makes the opportunities grow for your community. Charlie?
Yeah, that's all wonderful. And I think also the more things that are filmed here, you get that little credit at the end of your TV show that says filmed in the state of Montana. That's direct advertising to people that just saw that, and that'll help promote more filming in Montana. I think your film coalition, Lynnwood, that you're a part of, does a good job as well. I know word of mouth from all the different department heads on my show when we talk to producers, I talk to producers all the time now that say, hey, Charlie, how is it how did you do it? Does it work? Yeah, of course it works. Look at our show. And I can help walk them through it. So the more filming that happens, the more of these little things and these credits and the more people, word of mouth, that will inevitably help promote it.
So Charlie, we have a kind of a fun one here. Did you get to meet Laura Dern, and what was she like?
Yes, got to meet Laura Dern, and she's very, very friendly and unassuming, and a wonderful actress.
I can second that. She was so dedicated and really, really wanted to make Kelly's film a good project. And it was really lovely to have her on set. She was just an asset to the whole production.
I have a funny story, and I don't know if we have time for this, but I'm going to go into it anyways. You guys can cut me off if you want. But we were in downtown Bozeman filming a scene with Laura, and we had closed down it was kind of just like a bodega, like a little, I think it was an ice cream store, but there was a special needs child that came in every single day to get a diet soda. And we were in the middle of filming, and this young man wanted his diet soda and didn't really understand that the place was closed. And rather than, kicking the person out, Laura and I talked together, and he literally came in, got his diet soda in the middle of the scene that we were shooting with Laura, and then went over and was talking to Laura and asking Laura what she was doing. And Laura had to explain that she was an actress and we were filming a movie, and it was really endearing and just a wonderful scene. And I was glad that we got to get that young man his soda.
I have to add to that because some of my favorite stories are how much Montanans don't care if you're famous. So there'll be famous people shooting in Butte and, in Hamilton, and people will be like, you don't really care. There's not that same level of star-struckness. It's more about being real people. And I think that's great. All right, I've got a question here. As you spent time filming in Montana with its people and landscapes, what untold story about Montana are you itching to tell or film?
Oh, well, there is, Charlie and I are probably both itching to just dive into this with a big pot of film financing money, but there is such a opportunity for us to work with our Native American communities on, it's a topic that I could talk all day on. We have incredible Native American communities and stories. I grew up in a Native American community, and there is humor and pathos and tragedy and drama, contemporary and historical. And I can't wait to bring some of those stories to the screen more. I really can't. Those are just, Yellowstone's been really, really partnering with some of our Native American communities to tell some contemporary stories and to explore that. And there's just, such a deep well of that. That's something I'm really passionate about.
Charlie?
Yeah, I'll second that. I would love to do something in that genre as well. And then just personally, I don't know enough about the history of Butte and how important it was to America. And I don't think the majority of Americans do. I think there's the opportunity for a fantastic film there. The locations itself are wonderful. I can't stop taking pictures every time I drive over there. And I think that there's opportunity there for something very interesting. That's just on a very personal level, though.
I will second both of your answers. Great answers. Let's see. Are there any other questions? We're kind of coming to the end of the questions. Is there anything else that you, Charlie or Allison, would like to add too that we didn't get to, just to make sure we have that moment?
We do have several great organizations in Montana for people interested in participating more. The Montana Economic Developers Association is a great resource for anyone who's doing business in Montana. They have a huge network, and I'm always happy to work with them. So we encourage you to work with that group and join your local economic developers group. In the film office, we have a film ambassadors list, so that when Charlie calls me and says, hey, our group wants to go over to Frenchtown, and do you have any local contacts? We have a group of local contacts of volunteers who, and Lynnwood, you're one of them, who will take questions and assist people, like if we can't get to them, and have helped us. And those people range from some of our crew to mayors to economic developers to people with our regions and CDBs, our Chamber of Commerce's, members of the public. So if you're interested in that, you can always email us and get put on that film ambassador list. And then there's also a state organization called the Montana Ambassadors, which Jeff Wright's a member of, and several other people are that I can see on this call. And those people work nationwide to promote Montana in all kinds of industries. And so we'd also encourage you to reach out to them. And then, of course, support your local arts organizations.
Yeah, I guess I just want to say thank you for having us as a group, as Yellowstone. Thank you for having Yellowstone. Thank you for having Filmmakers, and thank you for having me on this call. We appreciate your support, and we can't continue to make films without the community's support. So thank you.
Thank you. Susan's telling me I should talk a little bit about PermaRed, since you both talked about Indigenous voices. PermaRed is in talks with a network. It's a TV series. It's Indigenous led with Indigenous writers and executive producers. And it's based off Deborah Magpie Erling, who's Salish and a teacher in Missoula, her book. And we too hope that that gets told. It's about 1940s assimilation in Montana. So she was just promoting that is a story that is on its way to hopefully being told, could open the door to many, many more of those stories as they should be told through the lens of Indigenous people. I think that's really important. So been proud to work on that. Allison, somebody did ask too, where did you grow up? You mentioned you grew up in a Native American community in Montana.
Oh yes, I grew up in the Wolf Point and Poplar area, and my family had come to Bozeman in the 1860s. And then I still have family that lives there. And then we've also lived in Jordan, Circle, Bloomfield, Glendive, Mill City areas. And my family has attended both universities. So we have an equal amount of Cat Grizz rivalry in addition.
That's why you're such a good resource, every place in the state. Well, are there any other questions? I just want to, there's more that came up. What is the best way for filmmakers to find Montana-based actors?
Well, we have several talent agencies in the state. And we've created a brand new directory listing on our website for Montana actors to list their information and their agent's information if they have one. And so that is something that we have just launched last year to get to know more Montana actors, but also theater programs, community theater programs, Montana Rep, and of course the university training programs are a great way to do it. We also have a bulletin board casting section on our website. You can send us a casting call. We post it for free. And I'll also reiterate to the community that We're part of state government at the film office. Our services are at no cost to filmmakers and the inquiries and to the general public. You know, we're here to serve Montana, make Montana a better place to live.
Somebody's asking what's the website, and I'm assuming that's the Film Office website. Would you mind giving that?
That's montanafilm.com, spelled out MONTANAFILM.com.
Charlie, you are encouraged to take the Underground Butte tour. It's a great history lesson.
Wonderful. I promise I will this season. So I'll see you there.
Yes, and then that will be a great TV show. You'll see comes out of that. And then this probably is more for you, Allison. It looks like some schools across the state are getting involved in their own film production. Harlem High School has been nominated for a national award. How is the state film office supporting the efforts of students across Montana?
So we have a number of ways we've been supporting students. We work with Media Arts and Public Schools program. We also work individually. We attempt to work individually with each tribe's language and history program. And then depending on where we're at with certain types of other opportunities, we help sponsor film festivals, such as the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival. And within that programming, the film festivals have opportunities for student filmmakers and reach outs. And so we have a number of ways that we are, you know, bringing the language of film. We also work with the Montana Arts Council. So we have developed a number of avenues to reach out to different people in the state to promote filmmaking and with the students.
Thank you. Well, I think that's kind of the end of the questions. And I just want to take a moment and thank Charlie and Allison so much for their wisdom and their time and all the information. Thank you to everyone who joined us and asked these wonderful questions. I hope this was helpful to everybody. I'll turn it over to you, Brett.
Thanks, Lynnwood, Charlie, Allison. Thank you so much. I for one, learned a great deal today, and I hope everyone else did too. Thank you to the audience. Without you, this whole thing would be pointless. I know you're out there even though I can't see you, and it means so much to me and the rest of the City Club Missoula board and our panelists too. I'm sure that you're all taking the time out of your day. And again, thanks to our sponsors, especially the University of Montana, First Security Bank, and Blackfoot Communications. Next month will be our annual State of the Community Forum on April 12th via Zoom. I hope you can all join us for that. Registration should be up online via Facebook and our website, cityclubmissoula.com, within the next couple of days, I'm sure. And with that, it's a wrap. Thank you very much.
Thank you.